appreciate you, Carla. Thanks for coming in. Sorry, I've been pushing this off and off and off. Um, I'm sure people don't even remember I even have this scheduled. Not sure if notifications will go out for this. Uh, I guess I'll find out. Because if not, I'm going to be talking to Carla all by myself. Right, Carla? um, you still here, Carla? Or did you leave too? It's been a long few couple of weeks, especially with like the end of school, and my kids are in their second to last day. You can't hear. Crap. Can't hear. Can you hear now? Can you hear now? Is that better? Oh, let me try this. Well, that could be a problem. How is it now? Hi, life is a gem. Let me know if you can hear me. Can you hear? Can you hear? Testing, testing. Better. Yay! Awesome. Cool. Sitting in my chair today. Good. Yeah, sometimes when this is hooked up and I don't take my ear, there's something screwed up with my like audio on my laptop. Thank you, thank you. Something screwed up with definitely with my audio. Like I said, it's been crazy since the ending of school, and literally. Hi, Samara. Hi, Life is a Gem. Hi, Carla. Thank you guys for coming. I appreciate it. It's awesome. Thank you. Um, I appreciate you all. Oh, so before I get into this, I'm going to tell you a really quick, funny story. I think I met the 87-year-old me yesterday. So I'm at my daughter's graduation and I'm sitting on the bleachers and I can't do bleachers. And I'm surprised I lasted as long as I did. The bleachers, and I'm like, my husband's looking, I'm like, I got to find a way out. After they went through all the way to our last name, like let's say we're like more towards the end than we are in the beginning. And once they said her name, I'm like, I'm up, I'm out. I got out and I went to go like lean against something because my back was so bad. And I found this woman, and her and I started talking, and we're like changing arthritis stories and stuff like that. And she's like, she's like, how old are you? I'm like 46. And she's like, how? And she was 87. Man, this woman had so much spunk though. She's like, I'm not going to let it get me down. I'm not going to let this arthritis get me down. And all of a sudden she said, thankfully I met somebody who can walk me to my car, because, oh my God, I don't know how I would have made it back to my car by myself. I didn't know what I was going to do. And thankfully she did. Someone came up to her. So as this person was going, we're getting ready to leave. She calls her by her name. She's like, Peggy, are you ready to go? They turned around. I'm like, she said your name was Peggy? She's like, yeah. I'm like, that's weird. I'm Peggy. And by the way, she liked my sunglasses. I'm like, that was enough for me. And I'm like, that's the old me. That's the 87-year-old me coming to tell me I'm going to live to 87. I don't want to live to 87. I don't think I do, at least. All right. Funny story. That's all. I just thought it was interesting. I'm like, oh, that's kind of crazy. Yes, Carla, it's so much better for my back. Unbelievably, it's so much better for my back. So the next episode I'm supposed to talk about, which we've gone through, I think we haven't gone through. We were supposed to go through episode 4 and 5. Episode 6 was Monday, which I just watched yesterday, but I only watched it once because I tend to watch these a couple of times, so I tend to memorize them a little bit more. So if I'm looking at my notes and I don't forget, hopefully my memory will be jogged. So, all right. So let me see here. Let me make sure I'm on the. Yep, I think I'm on the right one. Episode 4. Here we go. So in the episode 4 for the Eye Sniper. As I said, this documentary keeps proving to be better and better and better. Hi, How to Garden. Welcome. Thanks for coming in. We're going over the Eye Sniper on Vice, the documentary. It's up to episode 6, but I'm going to do 4 and 5 today. I'm going to leave 6 for like, hopefully, well, I'm just going to say the end of the week, but I'm just realizing we're still at Wednesday. It's Wednesday. I'm losing absolute control of what time everything is in my head. It's just getting overwhelming. All right, here we go. So I always thought it was interesting because I've never heard of this Red Onion State Prison. That's the name of the prison that Lee Malvo's in. I never heard of that. Hey, Gemma, good to see you. Thanks for coming in. So if I don't see the chat for a little bit, it's only because I didn't want to lose my place, because sometimes I can get distracted, as you all know, and I can completely lose where I am in my head. So I'll start by saying that because that happens all the time. Okay, episode 4 starts out with Lee talking about Jamaica. He's talking about Jamaica, and he's talking about in his yard, there's this absolute huge, huge mango tree. And it was so big, like everyone, used to like kind of hang out by this mango tree. And when he was around 11 and a half years old, he tried to hang himself from that tree. And this was the story he started off with for this part of the documentary. There was a name of a guy in his town. His name was Blacka. Wound up cutting him down from the tree because he, the body, he goes into a little bit more in depth what it's like to try to do that. I'm not going to go into that, but he wound up getting cut down. 2 days later, I mean, I guess this kind of shows you what it was like for him growing up, and like how growing up was very difficult for him. 2 days after he tried to hang himself from the tree, he said his mother beat him to a bloody pulp. She said to him, "I don't want to deal with your stupid ass anymore." He basically says he always lived in pain. And he also thought of the world as pain. So, for him to turn into darkness that John created him to be wasn't a very hard thing for him to do, because life had been already so difficult and so hard on him. What I will say is John Muhammad, he's the amount of intelligence that came from this man, like how to be a good sniper, how to kill somebody without anybody finding out that you killed someone. He was very good at it. He knew basically how to get in, how to get out, how to blend, how to do whatever it was to make sure he got out of the situation completely being unseen. That's they got a rise out of it. That was what they enjoyed. That's what they loved. So in this episode, they started talking about how John mapped out when he was looking to look into schools. Unfortunately, the next victim is a child, and that's what makes this really difficult. And this is where things got really, really scary for everybody, even more so than it already was. So they were in Bowie, Maryland, and John had picked out this school. He had everything mapped out, the position of where he wanted Lee to be, and just exactly what he wanted him to do. There were things Lee definitely wasn't comfortable doing. Hi, Lovable Bro, good to see you. There's definitely things he wasn't comfortable doing, but no matter what John asked him to do, he would do. Like, he thought like he owed him everything in the world. He tried to let the old him die and become this darkness. And he was really like, and the dependency that they kind of both had on each other was pretty incredible. And unfortunately for Lee, like he trusted him. There's no way that this guy could ever do wrong to him. And that's how he felt. He thought that, nope, There's no way that he would ever turn on me. So when they mapped out this school in Bowie, Maryland, his thought was to line up, find the best shot where you could get kids coming off the bus and pretty much take them down as they got off. As many as possible is what he wanted. And that's what he had said to Lee. He wasn't comfortable with it. He didn't want it to happen. He was hoping John would call it off. And thankfully, a bus never came, so he couldn't take the game. So he was like, look, John, the bus never came. What do you want me to do? He's praying at this point, call it off. And he's like, take what you can, take what's available. That's exactly what he said. He said, take what's available. So Lee didn't want to go back empty-handed. He didn't have the courage to go back to John without shooting somebody. He was more afraid of John than actually shooting someone. Kind of shows you what kind of headspace he was in. So he took the shot. He took a look at the boy. And he kind of stared at him. He said that he reminded him of himself. Kind of same coloring, same height, same build, looked like to be the same age. He said he didn't have the heart to shoot in a place that would take him out. So he shot him in the stomach. And the name of that 13-year-old boy that was killed that day at 8:09 a.m., which was I believe it was, I forget what day of the whole shooting that this was, but this was kind of still early involved. But the name of the boy, his name was Iron Brown, and he was 13 years old. Just so happened that he was suspended for a little bit from the bus because he ate a Twizzler on the bus. So his aunt was taking him to school. When he had gotten out of the car, he had been immediately shot and fell to the ground. They have one of his teachers, or one of the teachers from that middle school, come out, and she said that she heard a bang. She thought there was a student right behind the door. So as she was going to open the door, she thought she was going to see a student like right there, but he was a little bit further back on the ground. She's like absolutely terrified. And he went, "I've been shot." So quickly he jumps into the aunt's car, and the aunt rushes him to the hospital. Now, mind you, it's rush hour, it's AM. What they play is her 911 call as she's driving him to the hospital, because there's traffic and she can't get through the traffic. And you could hear that she's terrified that she's going to lose Iron. And she, like, no one, I mean, I guess they knew that, they kind of knew that this was going on, and like, oh my God, could this be it again? And once they get through all of that, they come and they show the two doctors who worked on Iron. And once again, they talk about when one of these bullets goes into somebody, it's not just it goes in and it exits out. It goes in and it takes out like a cone. So it's not just damaging the organs that the bullet hits. It kind of really tears everything apart. And they really didn't think this kid was going to make it. They were really worried and concerned. They go, because, it's on Vice. They go to commercial. They come back. Thankfully, Iron was not killed. Iron survived. He was through a lot of stuff. Oh, the teacher who actually was on the documentary, if you need to know, her name was Karen, I believe it's Murphy. It's Pumhey, Mumphy. And she was from the teacher who was at Benjamin Middle School. So they go into this whole thing about Iron and how he survived. And I'm telling you, like, that was definitely a story that brought tears to my eyes. It's good to see him. And he obviously is a kid out there now. Well, he's not a kid, he's an adult man now. And he's out there serving others, helping others. And he thinks because he got a second wind at life, that's what he's meant to do. And that was at least a nice story that had an okay ending. At least he survived. At least he survived. All right. In this whole thing, the news media is now getting frantic, where the news media is putting out information even before the police are putting out information. So mind you, this is 2002. This was long before YouTube or any kind of like media like this was out there. And what happened was is Chief Moose, who was in charge of the what was the county that hit? It was the let me see. I'm sorry. Forgive me. I'm trying to get through. I forget the name, but Chief Moose, who was pretty much of. I'm trying to remember what the name of that county was. Sorry, guys. I'm just looking to see if I can find. Can't find it. I'm sure I wrote it down, and at some point it will come to me, and I'll be like, "Damn, there it is." So the news media at this point was becoming a circus, and at this point, Chief Moose was kind of getting annoyed with the media, and he had come out basically stating, he basically, I'm getting actually episode 6 coming in at the same time. I'm like, nope, can't go there. Because there was also something else that happened in episode 6 with this news media. But they were constantly saying, with the news media, it was a white male, probably had substance abuse, probably definitely was in the military. Drug abuse was part of it. John and Lee all thought this was like a game every time they turned on the radio to listen to see what the temperature of is and was of what was going on in the news that day, is how they kind of went about their day. And when they got away with it, it was like he said, it was like a high. Let me see. So when they started doing the investigation for Iron Brown, was when they probably got their first real lead that they ever had. I brought this up in the last one. John Muhammad had Lee go into the Barnes and Noble store and buy tarot cards. He took the death card, and on the death card, it wrote, the Mr. Police, call me God, do not release to the press. So if they didn't bring cadaver dogs in to see if they could try and, maybe where, the bullet came from. See, John was literally like 2 steps ahead always of the police at that time. Hey, hanging with Mr. J. Good to see you. He was always like 2 to 3 steps ahead of the police. So he kind of figured, all right, they're going to start figuring it out what direction these bullets are coming from, which they'd have. And they had the dog and they had the sign. The dog was the one who found the shell casing of the bullet. Right by that, on the tree, was the tarot card where they found this. So the FBI at this point decided it would be a good idea to set up a 1-800 or a 188 service to call in for tips. So within 24 hours, they had to make this happen. And the woman, she's like, this was 2002. You couldn't just do stuff like that. So the FBI was completely overwhelmed by trying to get this up. It was a 188 number. And when they decided to open this line, they had 88 lines going. They only had 24 hours to set this whole thing up. They had to add telephone lines. They had to add computers. They had to add outlets. They had to add all these crazy amount of stuff within 24 hours to get this line up and running. So as soon as that line opens, and I guess, it went out on all the news programs that morning, thousands and thousands of tips came in. There was never a time that somebody wasn't on the phone. They said it was absolutely out of control with all the tips that were coming in. Some of them were crazy. Some of them were like, ha, 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 I'm the sniper. Like, just bullshit calls, unfortunately, that you get when you put stuff like that out. And there was one point that somebody's like, all right, that's it. No more crazy calls. The woman from the FBI is like, what do you mean no more crazy calls? She's like, who's doing this? Who do you think's doing this stuff? It's got to be a crazy person. So how can we not take crazy calls? And point well taken. I mean, seriously. So, I'm just overlooking something here. Sorry, just making sure I'm staying in the right spot here. All right. So that evening at 8:10 p.m. at a Sunoco in Manassas, Virginia, it was called the Battlefield Sunoco. At 8:10 p.m., Dean Harold Myers was shot. And said they saw, and there was someone who called the 911 and said that they saw a white van right by the scene. Well, at this point, John was picking up on that stuff. So he was intentionally looking for places for white vans. So he would constantly be throwing off the police, which he was unbelievably good at doing. So while in Manassas, Virginia, and they were going to the crime scene, somebody said that they had noticed that it was that they saw a Chevy Blue Caprice pulling away in the parking lot. They did bring this to the attention of the authorities, but apparently the authorities didn't think anything of it. Just someone said that they saw it pulling away. So after all this was happening, they wound up taking all these cars that were coming out of the street and pulling them over into the Bob Evans. Believe it or not, that was the position that John Muhammad and Lee was at. Now, mind you, Lee's in the trunk, John's in the front. And Lee starts to get worried because they're now stopping cars and talking to people. John says to Lee, don't worry. Human beings are so stupid. We have nothing to worry about. So they were in the Bob Evans parking lot across the street. And apparently they're coming across asking all these. No one heard anything. So he comes across a dark blue Chevy Caprice with one male inside. Lee was, like I said, inside the trunk. And according to Lee had said that John was really, really good at telling everybody exactly what they wanted to hear. He was a complete mastermind of deception. According to the police officer that they spoke with, and his name was, I believe, Steve Bailey. Yes, his name's Steve Bailey. He was the police officer who was there that day. And he spoke to him. He said the vehicle was a complete mess. He did notice there was a sock sticking out of the trunk, and it was a mess and it smelled. But he never opened the trunk. So the poor guy, he's like, I really feel as if I let him get away. I really feel, and he started to feel very, very responsible for everything that happened. So, as we said, everybody's still looking for a white truck and a white male. Yeah, and I felt bad. In the documentary, though, the guy, Steve Bailey, he was totally in tears. Like, he was totally in tears. But in the end, of episode 4, Lee had said, I couldn't disappoint him. I couldn't disappoint him. And everything that John would utter to Lee, no power, no control, no conscience, no mercy. I mean, was something that was really, really like hammered into his head. So that's the ending of episode 4. Episode 5 gets a little more interesting. I'd say episode 6 gets a whole lot more interesting. And I guess for me, because I do remember this, like I remember all of this extremely very well. And I can remember like the timeline, and there were days missing in between that they didn't do stuff, and no one understood what was happening. But in this whole thing, actually, Lee explains everything. So part 5 was day 9. And there's, I believe, 23 days of this whole thing. He told me he loved me. That is the name of this episode. He told me he loved me. In this episode, the first thing Lee starts talking about was, the one thing I want to tell you, I'm gay. It's like, I've always known I've been gay. I've known since I've been 7 years old. He said, I lived in Jamaica. Who was I going to tell in Jamaica? He's like, nobody would admit to they're gay in Jamaica. And he said, couldn't tell my friends. No. Who was I going to tell? My mom? No. My dad? No. A pastor? No. And there was nobody. A teacher? No, they'd just go and tell his mom. So there was literally nobody he could turn to for that. And that was something that plays a part in this whole thing. When Lee starts talking about the first time Muhammad wanted him to kill somebody, and he would talk him through things, and he would try to get him to remember. And he said, all I could remember is when he was there to go to the first place he ever took a shot, which was his sister-in-law's daughter. So it was his niece. I mean, but it was Mildred's niece, not necessarily his niece, but it was Mildred's niece. And John he had no idea who was going to kill in that house, but he just so wound up killing the niece. Basically, he said, you are here for retribution and punishment. Calmly raise your hand and squeeze. And calmly, he would tell him these things over and over again. And listening to this man, he came out and he finally said to John, he said, hey, look, I go that way. And he said, as soon as I said that, he knew exactly what I meant. And mind you, Lee's 15 at the time. John's like a father to him. And then John said, I had the same inclination. I experimented in the military. So when he said that to Lee wanted to see how far he could take this relationship and kissed him. And that began their relationship together, more as just father and son, but as lovers as well. I'm like, okay. So yeah, that's where this was landing. And him and John had totally sexual affair during this whole thing as everything was going on. Because he now, after that, he kissed him and he accepted him for that. He completely trusted him. He knew that this is the person he needed in life, no matter what, and would do anything for. And he basically said, I am yours. Do what you will with me. Do anything. And he loved him. And John told him he loved him often. And he says that because what we hear from the wives is that they were never told they were loved. He would get sick of them. He would dump them. and he would be done with him. But he loved Lee. But then again, Lee was doing exactly what he wanted him to do. So we talked about the shooting at the Manassas Sunoco from episode 4. The name of this guy comes up, and his name was Bob Myers, who was the brother of, his name was Dean Myers, who was shot at the Sunoco. Apparently he was a single guy. He was like the super uncle, never got married, and he would take, he was the uncle who would take the kids everywhere, go on a stupid adventure. All the kids always wanted to be around because he was fun. And he wound up going into the military. He said, although, he wasn't the fighting type of guy, but he did the call to, he felt the need to serve his country. He served his country. And when he came back, he literally came back the same guy. So they were lucky. He was able to come out unscathed and come home the sweet, nice Dean that they always remembered. Dean was 53 years old. At 5 a.m., his brother Bob got a knock on the door that the sniper got Dean, and that's how he found out. I'm like, ugh, nothing worse than getting that. I'm sure like middle of the night, first thing in the morning, something like that, and you have police at your door. Can't even imagine. And I did say, he went to Vietnam. Not only like he was in the military, he went to Vietnam. And believe it or not, he actually was awarded the Purple Heart and was, as I said, as sweet as people could be. The reason, after this, we start talking a little bit more about John and John's history. And I believe this is where his aunt, is this the one where his aunt? They start talking about how John really went into the army to escape the poverty that he was living in. When he went into the military, he was like a machine. He worked. Everyone thought he was wonderful until some crazy stuff started happening. And I'll tell you by that what that means. He did believe in the American dream at one point. His wife said he did believe in like having children, raising your family, having, he did believe in that. But when he went to Desert Storm, he got into the Islam life and was what he called what Lee had said was self-radicalized while he was in the Gulf War. They interviewed a man, his name was Private First Class Colonel Gerald, the 84th Engineering Battalion. That's what his term was. If I butchered that, I apologize. He fought in the war with John Muhammad, spent as much time with him as anybody could spend as much time together while they were in Iraq. He said, he referred to it as, because back then he was Sergeant Williams. He said he was very, very intimidating, very intimidating. He did not, and this comes from Private First Class Colonel Gerard. This all came from his and what he said. He did not like the white man and turned to Islam, self-radicalized. Now, this is kind of sensitive information. And I'll probably, once this is done, I'll put like a trigger warning on this, because there's definitely trigger warnings on this one. While they were driving through the desert during the storm, I guess getting from one base to another, there were sheep herders that were moving across with the sheep, and someone asked, if we are going to stop for, what are we going to do with these sand N-word? The man asked again. Once, let me make this straight here. Okay. He had asked it, so he said this like not once but twice, and it actually like enraged him inside, which I understand. But at this point, like, he had gotten so radicalized that once they got, and they said to mess hall. I don't know what that means, but they said once they got to mess hall, he took a bunch of grenades. He excused himself from the mess hall. He rolled these grenades up in a blanket, threw them underneath the tent. And literally, Lee says, then kaboom. He blew the tent up. Thankfully, no one was seriously hurt or killed. According to Private Gerald Williams, was under investigation after that point. And he said after that, he never saw him. Once you're in the Army and they pull you, you're gone. You're never heard from again. And but they couldn't prove that he was the one who actually put the grenades in there. But they kind of knew. And not only that, Lee also told the story the way John Muhammad told the story to him. So that's how we know that that's what John did. John told Lee this story. They couldn't prove it, but they sent him home out of his unit with honorable discharge. All right. Let me make sure. Let me see where we go to, because this is definitely a longer, not longer episode, but definitely more information. I'm just trying to see here. And some of these are just trying to see where this one ends real quick. I don't remember. Okay, we'll figure it out. They couldn't prove it, and I put in bold gaslighting, because he was obviously, before it was known as gaslighting, that's what he was doing. He was very controlling. He was quiet. He was manipulative. I'm just trying to. He talks about John, and when they talked about John with his wives, and I see that's what I realized, and I didn't write down here. They said he was a very, especially Mildred. Mildred said he was a very, very involved parent, but he was constantly gaslighting her. So like when the kids around, he would go back to the John she knew. Hey Remy, good to see you. Hey Laura Daly, good to see you. Sabrina, hi guys, so good to see you. I'm sorry, trying not to lose my concentration, because my daughter's going to be walking in that door shortly from her second to last day of school, which tomorrow's our last day, and then she will be a high school freshman. Yay! Anywho, what his wife have said is that he was just like a drill sergeant at home, and according to Lee, he said he had mad respect, and I don't know much about who this man is, Farrakhan. And he joined the Nation of Islam because of Farrakhan. And he believed in what they said is the black man was God and the white man is the devil. Sergeant, in the military, they actually referred to him sometimes as Sergeant X. I guess because he got radicalized and things like that. And they had also found out that he was trying to get other black soldiers to convert to Islam. When some of the people who were in the military had realized that this is what was going on, they're like, yo, we can't have somebody trying to, hey, Ems, good to see you, girl. Yes, high school. I mean, my God. I'm like, wasn't she just 8 like the other day? Anyway, let me get back to this real quick. Yeah, as I said, they turned him in. They said, they can't have a platoon sergeant. And not only that, he started going around threatening other people's lives. While he was in the Army, he was pretty much, he threatened high military ranks of them and their families, and every other person and all of their families. And it wasn't he was just pointing out and saying, this person, this person, this person. He was like, no, this person and everyone in your family, and this person. And they realized, they're like, oh, we've got a problem on our hands. So Once again, not enough evidence, and they sent him home, like I said, with the honorable discharge. At this time, they go to his friend that he had in the first episode, who was Robert Holmes. He was John's like really, really, really good friend. And, you know, he brings up the racism and everything else. And, you know, and that enraged him completely. He hated, and what Robert Holmes said was that he hated the country. He had calculated rage. He said that I'm going to take as much as them as they have taken from me. I want them to know what it feels like to be helpless. Now, all this was said to Lee. Now, his friend Robert Holmes was literally trying to piece things through. And as he was watching and hearing things, like things were starting to add up, like, holy crap, this really could be Lee and John. And he said that next thing we know, he says he wound up calling in, and he called his brother, and his brother's like, you need to call. That's kind of where they dropped it with him. And everything that he would preach to him, Lee basically said, like, he was like a sponge. He absorbed everything that John preached to him as well. He wanted to have the nation in fear of getting gas, just even basically leaving your house. He wanted the whole nation in fear. And he was able to get in between the man and his car, like just getting to your car or doing something or going somewhere. And that's why people were so afraid, because they couldn't even go to work without the fear of being shot, or fill up their car without the fear of being shot. Bye, Ems. Thanks, girl. All right, so they start talking about day 10 in Fredericksburg, Virginia. Everyone is always at a gas station. They needed to find a place where, once again, they wouldn't be caught. Like I said, John kind of mapped out these places normally like a day in advance. He would map out these places. And, you know, they basically knew exactly where to go, how to escape, and how to get out before they even decided to even shoot the gun. Like, they would always map everything out the day before. They always looked for like the easy access to highways, things like that. So, as I said, this was day 10. So they decided to do the lot across the street from the station. So at 9:30 at the Exxon, Spots, let me see. Oh, it was in Spotsylvania County, Virginia. Kenneth Bridges was shot at 9:30 a.m. at an Exxon. Friend Gary Shepard spoke on his behalf. He said he was fun-loving and serious. He was a black man. He was from Philadelphia, but he was down in that area for a conference, and he was looking to really make the African American community better. And they wound up taking this guy out. It didn't matter to them. They couldn't just, take out one kind of person, because John had said, if we stick to one color or one type or one gender, they're going to figure us out. So we have to make everybody afraid, including children. Like, that's, to me, that's where it got real scary, is when children got involved, and who these people were didn't care. They didn't care who anybody was, obviously. So his friend had said he was told not to refuel in that area due to people being shot. And of course, at some point he needed to refuel, and he stopped. And there was a guy there, and his name was Chris Etsy. He was obviously at the Exxon at that time. He said the one thing he could remember from this guy was that he had a very bright green shirt on. He said he looked at him directly. He went, ouch, ouch, ouch. fell to the ground, and he knew as soon as he hit the ground, the way he hit the ground, that he was dead. Unfortunately, he had 6 children, left a wife of 25 years. He was just like an outstanding citizen of Philadelphia. It's like when you go and you watch all this and you see these people and you see some of these people, I mean, literally, you can do nothing but sob. Some of these stories were just so hard. And so Lee goes on by saying it was a cloak to kill everyone. Because if, like I said earlier, if they stuck to one race, it could be easier to find out who they were. But still, as they're listening on the radio, still being 1, 2, 3, 4 steps ahead of the police, still looking for a man, a white van, and still looking for the white box truck. They didn't have anything. They had the Chevy Caprice, but everyone, ignored that information that was given by Virginia. And that guy, and I believe that was more in like Washington than that was Virginia, in Washington, D.C. And where he, like, I had him. And yet still, you can go back. Now, Robert Holmes had said, and I said this earlier, that obviously this came in later on, but that he called his brother, and his brother told him to call the police. When Lee talks about John, he basically says he worshiped him, he loved him, he needed him. They were having sex for months. After shootings was like an intense high, so that was like their celebration time. And he said, this is like the one time I finally hear that John took advantage of him and his age. He was only 15, and there is no way he could have not given any kind of consent. He just wasn't in the right frame, place, or mind. And as we know now, in these days, we know that. And we know that he took advantage. And I always thought that from the beginning, that he took advantage of this kid. From even when they found them, like, I felt really bad for this kid, that this guy like talked him into doing it, because he was a kid, and you're supposed to listen to your elders and do what your elders say, and whether it's crazy or not. And this is like crazy stuff. So in the documentary, they go through 3 years earlier. So they're talking about September of 1999. He was separated from Mildred. Mildred wanted absolutely no parts of him. Mildred was done. According to a friend of his, they said that he had the factor. He was like a ladies' man, which is funny. So I don't really think that's who he was, but they did say he was a womanizer. And that actually came from his first wife, that he was a womanizer. And his aunt actually called him that as well. And his aunt said that he loved the women, or his aunt, I'm sorry, it was his sister. Let me take that back. That was his sister. He was raised a lot when he was in Louisiana as a child by his sister. I think I might have gotten slightly confused when I was writing my notes, but that's all right. Let's go back here. Okay, so Mildred starts talking about John. After they had separated, John would come to the house in the middle of the night. She would hear him, and she knew. She 1000% knew what he was capable of. She's like, I knew there was a sniper loose, and I knew I needed to keep my eye on the sniper, and I was also looking for John. But she also said that when she was, they had separated, he would come in the house, have the key, unlock the door. She would hear him walk through. I would keep my eye open like this, so I could kind of see her a little bit. And he would go and he would look at her, and he would walk around the bed, and he would go around the bed, and he would stand over her. He would smell her, and we would check to see what she sounded like breathing. And then he would slowly get up, walk out of the house, and walk out. And she's like, She's like, I was terrified. He was able to find us no matter where we were. But like I said, Mildred knew exactly what he was capable of doing, and she knew he could be capable of something this, but I'm not necessarily sure if she was even that worried. She was definitely worried of John. She was definitely worried of the sniper, but she hadn't put two and she wasn't sure if that's what was going on because of what people were saying. People were saying two, some people were saying one, people had no idea what was going on. So there were 3 days there. Oh, here she comes. Good grief. There were 3 days with no attacks. On day 13, October the 14th, in Church Falls, Virginia. And this is kind of where episode 5 comes to an end. Give me 1 second here. Hi. Hi. I'm doing my ice sniper stuff. Wave. In my chair. Say hi. Good day? Good. Huh? Well, yeah, you're not going to do anything for the next 2 days. Or day. You got 1 day left. That's her. All right, so they had picked this Home Depot. And the reason why, because it had a garage. The garage was very, very bright. And in this very bright garage, you could see anything in black, in complete darkness. So they had definitely put themselves across the street into a place where no one could find them. Real easy access to get on and off the interstate. And that's the reason why they picked that area. It was just perfect lighting. They found his position, and in the dark, they went. And like I said, no one could see them. They start interviewing a woman, or actually a gentleman. I'm thinking of the wrong person. They start interviewing a gentleman. And what happened was that there was a woman, they were walking back and forth, and they were putting groceries or they were putting stuff from Home Depot into the car. And they're talking about how they would go back and forth and they didn't know which person to pick, and they wound up shooting her, who was the wife of this gentleman. And where is his name? Do I have his name here? Well, I don't have his name. I don't see the emotion between. He saw that they were people who loved each other. He said he saw definitely love. So at around 9:15 p.m., William Franklin and Linda Franklin, that was their name. William Franklin was the husband. Linda Franklin was the wife. She was 47 years old. Husband called into 911. Apparently, she was shot in the head. Turned out she was an FBI agent. And literally, they just, at this point, they've already have gone. By the time he's already just talking to 911, he's completely gone. Unfortunately, he hit her on the left side of the head, and it came out the other side. The police officer said it was the worst thing he ever saw. Lee had said it was the worst sort of pain he ever saw. There was no words to describe the amount of pain this man was in. He said, you get to know people's chemistry, and you can tell how people are, whether they're fun-loving, and by the way they interact with each other. And he said, when he looked at him, there's no words that could describe the amount of pain this man felt. And he could see, he's like, we felt like a monster. He felt terrible. But the police were there and they were investigating. They said it was so bright inside that thing, but yet it was so quiet. That was the one thing that they remembered, like, a lot from that one parking lot was it was just so bright, but yet so quiet at the same time. And they said, they were at this point thinking maybe the sniper knew that she was an FBI agent and this was a message to law enforcement. At least that's what Chief Moose thought. And the chief major in Fairfax, Virginia, they said that it was the chief in Fairfax. They said that they believed that they got a lead this time, and they said that it was a Middle Eastern man in a van. They had like complete description of the gun, what type of gun. I mean, complete details. And the spokeswoman with Chief Moose, I forget her name. She's on this documentary. She's pretty much in every episode. She basically said, when you get a description that's that clear and that, you know what, you have that much description, majority 9 times out of 10, it's not true at all. So Mildred was living in Clinton, Maryland. She said, okay, she did know it could be John to be the sniper, but she knew it could be John. And no matter what, Lee, still in his mind, they were not even though that they knew that they were darkness, all they knew that he believed at that time the monster was Mildred, because that's how John seriously moved forward this time. And Mildred said, I knew if he was going to come to get me, he was going to do it right. It was going to be a headshot. That's what she said. And they were literally stalking her. They knew her daily routine. And then one of her neighbors came out and said, did you know there was a dark colored Chevy Caprice that was watching you? And she had pointed it out, and she had looked in, and she went up, and she said there was a kid who was in the driver's seat. And she said the person in the passenger seat went like this with their paper so she couldn't see. And she's like, called him, figured it definitely could be him. So they already now know, not only now that we know that his friend thinks it's him, his friend from Washington State, but now Mildred knows of the blue Chevy Caprice. I haven't gotten to the point yet in the documentary where we know they get caught. We do know that John gets, capital punishment, and he was killed by lethal injection. There are things we know, but there are so many other things. And as I was watching episode 6, I can remember like there was those break in the days, and I will go into that with episode 6. And I found out, I'm like, that's why there was a break in those days. I was floored, absolutely floored. That's why, I guess I find this to be so interesting, is that I followed this every day because we were terrified. We were scared from it. We had no idea what was going on. And mind you, this was right after 2001. So terrorists and anthrax and all that kind of stuff that was going on around that time, we had no idea what to think or do. Hi, Cardigan. I love that name, Cardigan. So, yeah, and that pretty much, Lee says at the end of this is that he couldn't stop and he could not function without John. And that's pretty much where we were left with on episode 5. Once I get notes for episode 6, because I still haven't written them yet because things have been crazy in my house, obviously, I will definitely get that out. Otherwise, I'm going to definitely get that information together for episode 6. As I said, I just watched it. I watched it once yesterday, and but otherwise been busy. So, anywho, I want to thank you guys for tuning in for the iSniper stuff. It's been like I said, I'm sure it's going to pop up on some streaming service at some point. I don't know which one. But I think Vice is owned by HBO, so it could be like HBO. Who knows? But it's really, really good, really good. And if it doesn't, then maybe when this comes out more on streaming, that might get a little bit more attention, because I don't see really anybody talking about this but me. I mean, I'm not really looking like that much because I'm not really around right now. But I don't see a lot of like I don't see a lot of people talking or a lot of people who've seen this. But I'm finding this to be extremely interesting, and after the fact that we know what happened, and God, this was like 20 years ago. It's 20 years ago next year, and Lee's a 36-year-old man now, and but he does have the possibility of parole now, which he didn't before. And I don't know if that's even in the documentary or not. I don't even know how that, I don't know where they're going or how they're going to end this documentary, where it's going to take us up to present day, or if it takes us to the point of where John gets capital, or they'll tell us what happens. But that's what we know so far in this documentary. So guys, thank you so much for joining and watching. I really appreciate all of you for coming in, just popping by and saying hi. I know these are busy days, busy times, especially with the kids coming home from school and being home for the summer. And we're going to be doing lots of stuff. I'm going to try to. I mean, anything I can physically do, we'll try to do. But we're going to try to do lots of things. I just want to thank once again everyone for coming, and I hope everyone has a good day. Talk to you guys later.